when it comes to pilot production, that's more about the manufacturing process itself, not the product, but the process that creates the product. Once the design is set, you've gone through the DFM, you know what it is you want to build. Depending upon um, the risk of the product and of say latent defects and things like that, getting out of the building, out into the out to the customers. Depending upon that risk, you want to do a tighter and tighter process validation on your manufacturing processes. So that's a matter of what things do you test, when do you test them, to what standards do you test them. Are there any things that you can't test because they're destructive? How are you going to ensure that your process controls are in place so that you know that the natural outcome of a running in control process is the correct part that is going to function, and you don't run into the having too high of a yield on those. No, I mean, design for manufacturing is it's always ongoing. Somebody has an idea, hey, we can improve the product here, but just to get the product up and running, you want to complete at least the very first design for manufacturing project, to where everybody's happy that, okay, that's good enough, let's go. Then the pilot production is a short production run used to tune the procedures, tune the test, the production procedures, tune the test procedures, ensure that you've got everything covered. Make sure that programming the instrument goes smoothly. You've got all the tools in place. You've got all of the fixtures that you need, and all of them have been checked to make sure that they're correct. And you'll build product with that process that you've just designed, and then you'll look at the product when it comes out and make sure it's got everything that it needs to meet all of the requirements. And
Yeah.
so it's a pilot production run is a way to test your production process to make sure that it's running properly.
Yeah. And it kind of overarches, um, but design for manufacturing, I think a little bit more on the product side. So, when you've got a prototype, you can build one product. Anybody can build one of something, but your design for manufacturing will allow someone else, not an engineer, someone else who's not intimately involved in the product, or at least the design of it. It will allow somebody else to build multiple of the same thing accurately from the first one to the thousandth one to the 10,000th one, the same time every time. That's what design for manufacturing is. And um, we had an example of this with a new product that we launched, I don't know, 2 months ago now, where there was basically a little opaque plate that light would pass through, and it was made up of a couple of different sheets of plastic. And for the prototypes, it worked great. An engineer put it together, and they had their process, and that was that. We did it for the prototypes. We made 5 or 10 of them. That was that. But when we turned it over into, okay, now we're going to really manufacture this thing on a volume level, it wasn't feasible for that engineer to sit at his desk all day and just make these things up, because it just cost too much money. It took too long, all that. So we wanted to outsource it. We wanted to get that part made somewhere else and just come in, and all we had to do was install it. Come to find out, we could not find a company that did that process, that took all these pieces and used all these things and put it together. So we had to go back and essentially design that part so that it could be made out of house and brought in and just installed. Um, I consider that a little bit of design for manufacturability, because we had an idea and it worked for a couple units, but it couldn't be made reliably and repeatably on the in manufacturing, from the first to the 100th unit. So we had to kind of tweak that design so that it could be more manufacturable.
Mhm.
And that's
Mhm.
the kind of stuff that you see when you're in pilot production. You realize, oh, wait a minute, this is kind of cumbersome, not easy to do, not efficient. And then we go back and we kind of rethink how we wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And
And when you start doing something like that and you build 10 and the output is highly variable, maybe half of them were perfect, but the other half were not good enough. That kind of that tells you that your process design and maybe even the product design isn't under enough control yet. So you've got to figure out how are we going to do this so that it can be done just as a normal matter of putting it together, and you don't need an artiste to make adjustments and fine tuning on it. Sometimes sometimes it's tough enough you have to go with highly trained people to put it together in just a certain way, but still there's got to be some metrics about it that can control that process.